My name is Jason Schuster. I'm a doctor of physical therapy. I own Intricate Art Spine and Body Solutions. It's a continuing education company teaching other doctors how to do a couple things. This is a quick clip from a dry needling 3 course I was teaching in Phoenix, Arizona recently. We're discussing how you can use dry needling to target the vagus nerve, why that's important to regulate the autonomic nervous system towards homeostasis, the major problem that most humans have, which is chronic sympathetic hyperactivity, how to address that with dry needling, and why it's a key to improving overall health and well-being. The typical state of a human being, if you have the nutrients and vitamins and stuff that your body requires, the standard state of being is healthy. Sickness is not a standard state of human beings to be in, although it is normal in the United States. It shouldn't be normal, right? So if you have the base elements and nutrients and stuff that your body requires, the fallback state is health, right? So that's kind of, I think we've just gone so far down the wrong path of thinking about how to make people healthy in the US. That's kind of how I think about needling, is how can I maximally restore as much energy back to the nervous system and shift the nervous system, depress sympathetics and elevate parasympathetics as much as I can. So again, that would be, as far as I can figure out, targeting the parasympathetics and more or less just treating as much tissue pathology as we can. My main goal is how can I shift this person's nervous system from chronic sympathetic hyperactivity to a more homeostatic autonomic nervous system. Because as far as I know, there's no physical or mental condition that gets worse with a more homeostatic autonomic nervous system. The most parasympathetic structure in the human body is the vagus nerve. Per a recent meta-analysis, they estimate that 75% of all parasympathetic fibers outside of the brain are located within the vagus nerve itself. And the weird thing about the vagus nerve, you guys, is 80% of the vagus nerve fibers are afferent fibers, right? So it's the most lopsided nerve that I know of, at least in the human body. So most nerves are relatively evenly mixed, afferent and efferent. 80% of the vagus nerve is telling the brain what's going on with the organs. If the typical human condition is sympathetic hyperactivity, the most inhibited structure in the body is going to be the vagus nerve. If the vagus nerve is inhibited, what starts happening is our brain stops receiving the proper information about what's going on with the organs and everything else. So it's like, I speak fluent Spanish. If somebody gave me like a Spanish word to translate into English or vice versa, but the initial word was misspelled, like I wouldn't have too much of a good chance of accurately translating it if I was starting with incorrect information. I think the same thing is going on with our body and the vagus nerve. Is like with my hip, for example, you break your hip, it tries to fix it for a while, and then there's some like block that happens between the brain and that part of the body, and it stops being able to communicate properly, and it's not that we lose the ability to heal, it's like we lose the resources that we need to do the healing. That's kind of how I think about needling, is how can I maximally restore as much energy back to the nervous system and shift the nervous system, depress sympathetics and elevate parasympathetics as much as I can. So again, that would be, as far as I can figure out, targeting the parasympathetics and more or less just treating as much tissue pathology as we can. That's just the overall outcome of needling, right? So James has done good studies on this and lots of other people showing that basically no matter what you do with the needles, the overall outcome is a shift towards autonomic nervous system homeostasis. So although needling initially elevates sympathetics, the overall outcome of needling is sympathetic depression and parasympathetic elevation. If that was not the case, acupuncture never would have continued to be a thing. That it never would have continued because it just wouldn't have helped people. So the way I look at acupuncture, you guys, is I think of acupuncture and the meridian system and stuff. Well, number one, if you get people that say, oh, like energy lines is like black magic and witchcraft and stuff like that, you automatically know that person has no idea what they're talking about, because if we're living people, human beings, we have to have energy lines flowing throughout our body. I believe that we either don't have the technology right now, which is totally possible, to be able to see, like, determine these energy lines. I tend to think that they're not like specifically set meridians like they have in acupuncture land. I think that they may be able to like change a little bit depending on certain things that happen to us, but whatever the reason is, acupuncturists thousands of years ago, in my opinion, were just trying to figure out an explanatory process for what we're doing to the autonomic nervous system. We just didn't know what the autonomic nervous system was back then, right? So I love acupuncture. I can't stand physical therapists who are like, why would you read acupuncture literature? That's like, as far as I understand, does James teach to do the ears and stuff like that?
They don't do the battlefield stuff, no.
In his course. So it's so amazingly helpful, you guys. I was never taught how to do the ears. I learned this on my own reading old acupuncture books, and I was like, I was so pissed when I can't tell you how mad I was. I was like, what the fuck? I didn't learn this. Because I thought St. Augustine was like a pretty good school and stuff when I was there. I was like, I can't believe I didn't learn this, right? So that's how I think about it. So as far as the parasympathetic parts of the autonomic nervous system, we have vagus nerve, should be the strongest. So there's two spots in the ear that are innervated by the auricular branch of the vagus nerve. And you got like the base of if you want to simplify it, think like C2 and upwards is more parasympathetic dominant. The pelvic floor area and the stuff that S2 to S4 innervates, because that's parasympathetic dominant, right? And then you got the vagus nerve itself. So overall, those are the ways that I think about targeting the parasympathetics. And then any pathologic tissue that you needle is going to have an overall parasympathetic elevating effect on the body, right? That we know that to be factually true based off of literature and stuff like that. So that's how I think about going about needling my patients and stuff. So one of the things, you guys, that I really do notice, and it took me a couple years to like really wrap my brain around that, like, this is actually happening. It's one of my hockey friends that I needled. He was like, man, I'm seeing one of your friends and it just hurts more when I'm getting needled by them, and I don't really understand why. And I was like, dude, I don't know why. And he called me back a couple weeks later and he's like, man, I figured it out. They weren't doing the ear needles and some of those other needles first. They were just going in to the other parts of my body. So it really does make a big difference, you guys. So the first needles that I use on all my patients, depending on whatever position they're in, are the most parasympathetic heavy locations that I can target, because I want to put a dampener on that initial sympathetic spike that's going to happen from poking them with needles. So that allows people to tolerate more needles. It makes treatment less painful for them, and it just allows us to shift their nervous system more without making them so uncomfortable. Chronic sympathetic hyperactivity causes chronic body-wide inflammation, right? One of the crazy things, you guys, with this stuff, and I don't know how much people think about this stuff, if you think about, so like with COVID, with chronic, like with what you got going on, with any type of chronic problems, one of the most consistent things across human beings is you see body-wide excess pro-inflammatory proteins and inflammation and stuff like that, right? I think it's important to think about, like, how is that stuff happening, right? So how do we get, if you get COVID or you get a virus or whatever, how do you get more pro-inflammatory proteins? So you look at the literature, like interleukin-1, tumor necrosis factor alpha, interleukin-6, C-reactive protein, all these pro-inflammatory proteins, they're not getting like put in our body by little like inflammatory protein wizards or anything, right? It's our genes, we are changing the way that our actual DNA is getting expressed, right? So when you get sick, we have certain sets of genes. Very rarely do we have one gene that gets turned on and it changes things. It's usually a combination of stuff. But how we get more pro-inflammatory proteins is our body gets aggravated, our nervous system shifts into more sympathetic hyperactivity, which starts expressing segments of our DNA that are responsible for making those proteins, right? So needling really is altering the way that our genes are being expressed on a very, very base level, right? So it really is work. If you understand like what we're doing with it and how it's working, we are really changing stuff on a very, very like first principle base level, which I think is one of the reasons why we can make such a big difference in people's health. This is one of the things that drives me bonkers about medicine, you guys. So you talk like based on this book, we're all taught in school actin, myosin, overlap, sliding filament theory, right? Have you guys ever heard of a protein called titin? Okay, so this is the freaking nuts thing about our medical system, you guys. I think most medical doctors and doctor-like people go through their whole career assuming that we know like 1,000 times more than we actually know about medicine. Us being ATs and PTs and stuff, you would think that we should be the most knowledgeable about how muscles contract and stuff like that, right? We should be, and I think we are, but we suck still. We suck, right? So this is, let me just show you this, you guys. This is insane. So if you guys are ever interested in my crazy thoughts and stuff like that, if you go to our website and you go to the blog tab, I've got like 100 articles. I don't have the power that James has to get all these things put in peer-reviewed journals, but I just publish them on our website. But I wrote this article not that long ago, you guys, right? So that is a ChatGPT picture too. You guys, by the way, it's so cool. It's amazing. So this is insane, you guys. So we're all taught that there's actin and myosin. What we're not taught is that at most that's 66% of the proteins that are in a sarcomere. There's a third protein that's in a sarcomere that's called titin. Titin is the biggest protein that's been discovered in the human body ever so far. So I, as you guys can probably tell, I like to be a little bit sarcastic and stuff sometimes. So in here, I say like, well, why hasn't this been taught, right? Well, it must have just been discovered like last year, and it was discovered in 1979, this protein, right? So there's a big theory out there called the winding filament theory. So we're all taught, like I remember specifically in school, like why are muscles stronger in eccentric contraction than they are in concentric? As far as we know right now, the answer is the titin protein. So that's like a pretty freaking big deal that we probably should be aware of, right? So what they can see on electron microscopy is what they think is happening is that as the actin and the myosin start to extend, the titin protein wraps around the actin and the myosin filaments, and it adds like an extra friction that allows eccentric contraction to be stronger than concentric contraction. So whatever the reason is, that's a massive missing link to like our understanding of how muscles work. So I just like to bring that up, you guys, because so many, and I think PTs are better at this than most other professions, but so many people like you'll say something about muscles and they'll like tell you these answers like they know everything there is to know about muscles when they don't know 33% of like what's going on in the muscle anyways, right? So I think that just something good to keep in mind, because again, it seems to me like people think about acupuncture and dry needling and they're like it's too simple to actually be working, and it does seem simple, but it's working on things that mainstream medicine has just overlooked for so long that I think we think that they don't exist anymore, or like the human body doesn't work like that. Hope you guys like this clip. Check out our school channel, school.com/CEU, and also check out our website, intricateartseminars.com. We have online and in-person nutrition courses, dry needling courses, joint manipulation courses, manual therapy courses, and business courses on how to start a private practice business, how to be financially successful in medicine, how to be clinically successful in medicine. We have all that both on our website and on our school channel, school.com/CEU, intricateartseminars.com. Thanks, guys.